China's Cultural Revolution is the biggest political catastrophe that had happened in China for 10 years, from 1966 to 1976. At that time, China's Communist Party leader Mao Zedong attempted to cleanse all form of threats to the country's ideology from the Chinese society. The result was persecution of many intellectuals, bourgeoisie, and alleged right wings. It was a disastrous 10 years for the people of China. Yet, through disorder, pain, and chaos of the Cultural Revolution, appears a new genre of poetry in the modern Chinese literary world called Menglongshi. Menglongshi is often translated as misty poetry, obscure poetry, hazy poetry, or shadow poetry. The naming is due to its multifaceted nature. It has layers of meaning that is often unclear or undecipherable on the surface. The group of poets who writes poems in this genre were called Menglongshi, that is associated with an underground journal movement called Jintian. Amongst them were Gu Cheng, the most prolific and popular poet of the Menglongshi genre. Having a father of a poet, Gu Cheng has been writing his poetry since he was 5. Yet, his fame comes after a generation, a poem that is considered as one of his most remarkable works in the modern Chinese literature. In this research, we use two intrinsic aspects of poetry, symbol and imagery, to determine the meaning behind Gu Cheng's poem in the Menglongshi era. The reason why we use those two intrinsic aspects is because two of the main characteristics of Menglongshi poems is its heavy usage of symbolism and images techniques influenced by contemporary Western poetry. Therefore, in order to find and investigate symbol and imagery aspects in the poems, we use the prompts in Lawrence Perrin's book, Sound and Sense, as a guide. Lawrence Perrin, in his book, elaborates that symbol is something related to a specific word that is used to define something that means more than what it is. To identify symbols, we ask, what kind of imagery is controlling the poem? What is the imagery an allegory of? In which line did the author build the allegory? Are there any repeated movement that forms a pattern? While Perrin described imagery as something related to the representation through the language of sense experience, we identify imagery by asking, what is the mood that is conveyed through the images in the poem? How is the author's attitude depicted in the poem? What emotion can be felt by the readers when reading the poem? And what is the image depicted in the reader's head when reading the poem? This research will be analyzing 8 of Gu Cheng's poems selected from the Menglongshi era. Those 8 poems are The End, One Generation, Feeling, Photography, Walking in the Rain, Wink, Separation, and Yesterday Like the Black Snake. The End. In a blink of eye, the avalanche stops. The giant skull piles up in the riverbank. The morning sailboat slowly passes by, unfolding yellowing pall on the casket. How many beautiful greenery has its body bent by suffering, making the soldiers cry. The moon that has been cut down, God had hidden them in a thick fog. Everything is over. In The End, Gu Cheng used the word moon as an allegory of the Cultural Revolution. This poem's mood is dark as indicated by words used such as mourning and suffering to express sorrow for the Cultural Revolution's victims. Yet in the lines, God had hidden them in a thick fog indicates an end of sufferings. A generation. Dark night has given me dark eyes, yet I use them to search for a light. The dark night refers to dark times during the Cultural Revolution, and dark eyes refers to hopelessness of those who have suffered. A generation illustrates the sorrow of Gu Cheng's generation. It's about how the young people of his age at some point lost all hope of the future. As somber as it may started, Gu Cheng would end his poem with encouragement filled with hope, such implied in the line, yet I use them to search for a light, meaning that not everything has lost, because even though they have lost their past, they still have the chance to look for a brighter future. Feeling. The sky is grey, the road is grey, the building is grey, the rain also grey. In the middle of the dead grays walks through 2 children. One is bright red, the other light green. Gu Cheng started this poem by describing a colorless world with the word grey, and he ends it with hopes of change, symbolized by the 2 children. The children were described in 2 colors, bright red representing luck, and light green representing new life. This is a poem that expressing the author's hope and aspiration in the middle of the devastating world. Photography. The sunlight flickers in the sky, then buried in the black cloud. The rainstorm washes away the negative film of my soul. In photography, Gu Cheng uses a rainstorm to depict the process of photography. The sunlight is a camera flash, the rainstorm washes away is the washing process of a film, and the negative film is his soul. Gu Cheng used black cloud to symbolize suffering from the Cultural Revolution. This poem illustrates how his life changed drastically due to the revolution, yet in the end, it's the hardships that made him who he was.
Walking in the rain. The grayish cloud can't be washed clean anymore. We put up the umbrella, painting the sky in black. In the night, unhurriedly floating by, there's a pair of stars, seemingly not having the fixed orbit. Sometimes goes near and sometimes goes far. Gu Cheng once again depicted the darkness caused by the Cultural Revolution through an imagery in the grayish cloud and painting in the sky in the black. The symbol in this poem is a pair of stars that refers to China's hopeful reader Deng Xiaoping and Hua Guofeng. This poem tells a story that even though the damage caused by the Cultural Revolution and dark times in people's heart cannot be undone, Gu Cheng puts hope into these two profiles, voicing his belief that they can take turns to lead China.
Wink. In those years of mistake, I had such illusion. I believe that I never averted my eyes. The rainbow that dances around in the fountain gently watches the pedestrian, in a wink of an eye, turned into a lump of serpent shadows. The chime that rested in the church, silently ticking the time, in a wink of an eye, turned into a deep well. Red flowers that blossoms in the silver screen, happily greeting in the spring wind, in a wink of an eye, turned into a pool of blood. For the sake of believing, I keep my eyes wide open. In a glance, some objects seem unrelated, but depicts a positive-negative relation when juxtaposed. These objects make the former into a fake, an illusion. The rainbow is a serpent's shadow, the chime is a deep well, and the red flowers are a pool of blood. This imagery shows Gu Cheng feeling, living in the chaotic period of the Cultural Revolution, mistaking terror for peace. Being exposed to reality, he makes the decision to keep his eyes wide open.
Separation. Today, you and I will step over that ancient threshold. Don't wish me well, don't say goodbye. All of these things best be treated as a performance. It's better off in silence. Hiding is not at all a betrayal. Let's leave the memories in the future, just like how we leave dreams to the night, and tears to the vast ocean, and winds to the sailing boat. Separation, as the name suggests, is about moving on. It tells how Gu Cheng wants to separate from his past, having a decade of his youth spent in camps. He finally bids farewell to that past in silence, for there's nothing to say. He justifies that living is not betraying his past hardships, but rather to heal himself as expressed in let's leave the memories in the future, just like how we leave dreams to the night, and tears to the vast ocean, and winds to the sailing boat. Yesterday, like a black snake. Yesterday, like a black snake, curling in the corner. All of its life is just as cold. When it died, also not at all warm. It has once been in a lot of people's hearts, leaving mosses, painting color of the blood. Now, it has died buried in a mountain of newspapers. Elusive, thousands of words are just like a party of ants, discussing about how to prevent its revival. Gu Cheng depicts the horror of the Cultural Revolution with the description of a black snake from its life to death. When it lives, it's cruel and cold-blooded. It's just as cold. When it died, also not at all warm. The event left trauma like mosses and damaged people's lives as described in Painting the Color of the Blood. After his death, he shows that people have been preventing its revival through plenty of discussions so that the same catastrophe won't happen again in the future. Conclusion. Gu Cheng's poem tells the sorrowful hardships and trauma caused by Cultural Revolution. Yet, more often than not, Gu Cheng ends his poems with hope and aspiration. To avoid government persecutions, Gu Cheng used objects like moon, night, and black snake to symbolize the Cultural Revolution. He also described the event through color symbolism and imagery of nature, such as dark night, the sky is grey, the black cloud, the greyish cloud, and so on. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the video.